So, you ever wonder why some entrepreneurs just take off while others seem to stall out? Well, it turns out the secret isn't always about following the playbook. Sometimes it's about knowing exactly which rules to break. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let me tell you a story. It starts back in 1995 with a graphic design teacher, Linda Weinman. She kicks off a little website called lynda.com. Really, it was just a simple sandbox for her, a place to mess around with new tools and show off her students' work. You know, just a side project. But that little side project, it started to grow. And then it grew some more. And then, well, it eventually got sold to LinkedIn for $1.5 billion. I mean, seriously, billion with a B. That's a pretty incredible outcome for what started as a classroom tool. So what happened? How did she pull that off? It wasn't just about being in the right place at the right time. Nope. It was because she had a fundamentally different way of thinking. Her success, and the success of so many others, comes from a handful of mindsets that go completely against the grain. Now hold on, what do we even mean when we say mindset? Think of it like your own internal operating system. It's that collection of attitudes, habits, and gut reactions that pretty much decides how you're going to respond to a challenge, or more importantly for an entrepreneur, an opportunity.
And here's where things get interesting. Because on one hand, you've got conventional wisdom. You know, all the best practices they drill into you at big companies and in business schools. But on the other hand, you have the entrepreneurial mindset, which often finds success by, well, doing the exact opposite. So let's break down those rules.
All right, first up is a really simple one. Say yes. Now, the typical advice is to stick to your knitting, right? Focus only on what you do best and say no to everything else. But entrepreneurs, they tend to see that a little differently. Take this company in Brazil, Otmo Digital. They were an event management company. One day, a client asks them if they can install TVs and satellite uplinks in 260 stores all over the country. Now, they knew absolutely nothing about this. But instead of saying, sorry, not our thing, the founder just said, yes, we can. And by doing that over and over again, they completely reinvented their business. Not once, but 4 separate times. Okay, mindset number 2, focus on the problem, not the product. Big companies are obsessed with iterating on their products. Just think about it. How many flavors of Coke are there? Or laundry detergents with new and improved blue speckles? Entrepreneurs, though, they start from a totally different place. Check this out. An inventor named Jonathan Thorne noticed a really specific problem. During surgery, the metal forceps that surgeons use can actually stick to human tissue. Now, for some doctors, this is just a minor annoyance, but he realized that for others, it could be a really big deal. So Thorne goes and creates a new metal alloy that doesn't stick. And yeah, plastic surgeons found it useful. But then he discovered that for neurosurgeons, people operating on the brain or the spine, this problem wasn't just an annoyance, it was absolutely critical. By obsessing over that high-stakes problem, he built an amazing company. Always start with the problem. All right, this next one is going to feel totally backwards, I promise. But trust me, think narrow. When you're just starting out, targeting a tiny, tiny market can be your biggest advantage. See, here's the deal. Huge companies have to go after huge markets just to move the needle on their bottom line. It's the only way they can grow. But for an entrepreneur, trying to be everything to everyone is a surefire way to fail. The smart play is to find a super specific, narrow niche and own it. Think about Nike. I mean, today they're this global behemoth, right? But they didn't start there. They found a problem that only a tiny group of people even had: elite distance runners. Their shoes were designed for sprinters on a track, not for pounding the pavement on roads. So Nike created the perfect shoe just for that tiny group. They nailed it, mastered their crafts, and then used that as a launch pad to become the giant they are today. Mindset number 4 completely flips the traditional way of financing a business on its head. Forget spending months begging investors for cash. The entrepreneurial move: get the cash from your customers before you've even built anything. I mean, just look at Tesla. For their very first car, the Roadster, they got 100 people to pay $100,000 each. That's $10 million in cash before a single car rolled off the line. And then they did it again with the Model 3, raising around $500 million from customer deposits. That's how you fund a business, with your customers' money. So our last 2 mindsets really go hand in hand. It's a 1-2 punch of being resourceful, which is really just a fancy way of saying use other people's stuff, and acting fast, which often means not asking for permission. So let's look at this company in the UK called Go Ape. They do these treetop adventure courses. Now, did they go out and buy huge forests to start their company? Of course not. They borrowed the land, they borrowed the trees, they even borrowed the parking lots from the UK Forestry Commission, which just wanted more people to visit. All Go Ape had to do was show up and add the adventure. They built a huge business on borrowed assets. And that brings us to acting fast. Just think about it for a second. If the founders of Uber had walked into a city regulator's office and said, "Hey, can we start a taxi company without any taxis?" What do you think the answer would have been? No way. Entrepreneurs often dive into spaces where the rules are kind of fuzzy. They act first and they figure out the details as they go.
So there you have it. 6 powerful, rule-breaking mindsets. But just hearing about them is one thing. The real magic, the real breakthrough, happens when you start applying them to your own life and your own challenges. So let's make this personal for a second. As you're listening to this, which of these mindsets, saying yes, obsessing over a problem, thinking narrow, which ones already feel kind of natural to you? Which ones are already in your toolkit? Okay, now for the next question. Because here's the thing, these aren't personality traits you're born with. They're skills. You can learn them. So which of the others, the ones that don't feel so natural, could you actually work on and develop? And let's think bigger than just you for a moment. Who on your team, who do you work with that could really benefit from thinking this way? Could you share these ideas with them and maybe help them get unstuck on a problem they're facing? And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. Think about a challenge, a roadblock that you are facing right now, today. Is it possible that one of these rule-breaking mindsets, being resourceful, getting the cash first, or just saying yes, could be the exact key you need to unlock your next big breakthrough?